Kara should have it first.
I know, she's got the first question. Oh, you can switch.
Yeah, we can just pull this.
Here you go. We'll put this like right here in the middle.
Okay, terrific. Can you hear me okay with the mic? All right, excellent. Well, welcome to today's panel discussion. Thank you all for joining. I'm Nat Cohan. I'm the president of the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions, and I'm really pleased to be moderating today's panel discussion on U.S. corporate climate action, bold commitments, and transformational actions. We've got a great panel of chief sustainability officers from 5 Climate Pledge signatory companies. We have 4 up there now. We've got one person working his way through the badge, and so we hope we'll be joined by the 5th in progress. As I said, I'm Nat Cohan. I'm the president of C2ES. We work with companies and policymakers to accelerate the transition to a thriving, just, and resilient net zero future. And there's Chris. Excellent. So we're complete. And so we're particularly glad. I'll introduce the panel in a minute. I just want to say to give you a sense of where we're going with this. I'm particularly glad to be here given our work because it's so important when we see companies, first of all, making the kinds of commitments and the kinds of climate action pledges that all of these companies have done, but then following through with that on the plans and the actions that it takes to meet those. I think we're right at that inflection point where, 5 years ago, nobody thought about if you said net zero, that sounded crazy. Well, not to some of the companies on this panel, but that sounded like the cutting edge. And now we have so many companies doing that. But now what we see is the need to translate that into commitments or translate those commitments into action so that they can be credible and so we get the reductions we need. And so I think that'll be a big part of the backdrop and the focus for today's panel. So I'll make some quick introductions and then we'll dive in. We've got Kara Hurst, the Chief Sustainability Officer of Amazon, Katie McGinty, Chief Sustainability Officer for Johnson Controls, Virginie Helias, the Chief Sustainability Officer for Procter & Gamble, Doug Sabo, the Chief Sustainability Officer for Visa, Inc., and Chris Hook, who is Head of Global Sustainability Strategy and Planning for Uber. So, Kara, I want to start with you. All of the companies here, not coincidentally, have signed up for the Climate Pledge, a commitment led by Amazon to be net zero by 2040. And so maybe give us a little bit of background, what led to the formation of the pledge and where it stands today.
So I'm not leaning into that. But thanks so much, and thanks everybody for joining us. We're really excited to be able to host this and to have our fellow signatories here. In 2019, we had an idea to launch and co-found the Climate Pledge with our partners Global Optimism, led by Tom Rivett-Carnac and Christiana Figueres, who of course was the architect of the Paris Agreement. And one of the ideas behind that was we had been looking at the science and the IPCC reporting, which of course told us we needed to move faster based on what we were seeing. And Christiana, being an architect of the Paris Agreement and having her in agreement, it was really fascinating. So our commitment to go faster and commit to net zero carbon by 2040 was not only a big and ambitious goal for Amazon, but one of the things we knew is that we could not do that alone. With all the industries that we're in and many of the hard-to-abate sectors, we would absolutely need all of our supply chains and value chains and partners to come along with us. And we wanted that collective transformation to happen through those industries. And so we were really excited about not only having that as our commitment, but inviting others to join us in that. And then hopefully, we thought at the time, having some other companies come along and then having eventually joint action. So fast forward 4 years ago from that commitment, we are absolutely thrilled that we have over 450 signatories in the Climate Pledge, which is incredible. And they span over 58 different industries across 38 different countries. We're trillions of dollars in revenue. We're close to 10 million employees collectively. So it is truly a global effort. And we are now focused on joint action. So now it is really about programs like Lane Shift, partnerships with groups like C40, and thinking about how do we collectively come together and look at those hard-to-abate sectors, look at joint action, and think about transformational projects that focus on the second part of the climate pledge. Of course, the first is you have to manage and measure and report on greenhouse gas emissions, but the second is that big commitment about operational changes. So how do you decarbonize first in your operations by making those changes? And we're starting to do that collectively, and I know we're going to hear great things from the signatories here about the changes that they're making in their businesses. And we've certainly been doing that at Amazon as well by making huge changes in things in our transportation, like electrification of fleet. We had announced, 100,000 electric delivery vans that we purchased from Rivian. We have over 10,000 on the road now. We will have all 100,000 by 2030. We had announced at the time our commitment to 100% renewable across our global operations by 2030. We've subsequently pulled that up to 2025, and we're at 90% now. And we will meet that goal in 2025. And we have a 23 gigawatt portfolio across 23 countries. So we are really going at scale with this and leaning in, changing our building standards, looking at things like steel and concrete, changing how we build our data centers, looking at our buildings, our HVAC systems, and deploying things like our Climate Pledge Fund, our $2 billion fund, to really invest in early stage decarbonizing technologies. And of course, doing that and sharing that with our signatories and learning a tremendous amount from all of them and what they're doing. So it's been, I think, incredibly successful, and we have a lot to learn and just a lot of fun, too. A lot of fun to work with each other.
Thanks so much. And so I want to build on that, that question of sort of progress. Kari, you talked about the progress that Amazon has made, some of the highlights. I just want to run down the line and hear from each of the other companies on the panel. Since making that net zero commitment, what has excited you most about the progress you've been able to make towards that commitment? Katie, maybe we'll start with you.
Okay, thanks. And thanks to everybody for being here. Again, I'm Katie McGinty from Johnson Controls. So Johnson Controls is a very young company, young, cutting edge, 140 years that we've been around, but that's sustainable. It has sustained. And part of it is when we have partners that help to inspire us to continue to raise the bar and innovate continuously. So for us, we had already been on a pretty rapid journey to emissions reduction. Across our big three in terms of operations is the electricity that we consume, the refrigerants that we use, and our fleet as well. And I am happy to say, since we signed the pledge, we are at about more than 75% of our Scope 1 and 2 commitments already made through a lot of work that my friend Renee Kizar does. And even on Scope 3, we are at about 85% of our goal there, and those are the SBTI targets. But the pledge really rocket charged a lot of what we were doing. And I'll give you a couple examples. So we had committed ourselves to at least 75% of our new product R&D we would dedicate to helping tackle climate change. With the pledge, it did get everybody fired up, and in the 2 years since, we've been more than 90% of all of that new R&D towards helping to tackle climate change. To get a little granular about it, so this is some of the stuff that led to. It's like, hey, we work hard every year to try to make those major building operation systems that we build more efficient, and it's true. It's like 3 yards in a cloud of dust, the machine is 10% more efficient. But we're claiming and committing to net zero. That 10% isn't going to be enough. So it caused us to step back and to say, how can we not just look at the back end of the machine and its marginal operational efficiency, but let's look at the front end, and can we achieve many multiples of that performance? And when you look at the front end of major heating and cooling systems, which is important because HVAC is the single biggest source of electricity load and the single fastest growing, when you look at the front end, you see people are burning a whole lot of stuff to generate the electrons to run the machine. And it led us to say, well, is there another way to achieve the heating and cooling? We're not burning a whole bunch of stuff. And that led us to pull back out a platform that we had, but that had not gotten much traction. And that platform, I have identified myself now as a total heat pump groupie because a heat pump is truly a magic machine. First of all, you are combusting nothing on the front end because instead of burning to achieve the electricity needed, the heat pump collects thermal energy and then it concentrates the thermal energy. So already you got something that's not 10% more efficient, it's 3 times as efficient as a conventional machine. But here's where we can take it to the next level as well. Most times, after we run one of those machines to pull the heat out of a building to cool it, we throw that heat away. We throw the heat away, one, wasting it, but second, to really add insult to injury, usually people throw water away to dissipate that heat in a cooling tower. So on the back end, what a heat pump allows you to do is instead grab that waste heat that comes off of cooling a building, put it back to work for hot water in the building, or put it back to work to heat a different part of the building that needs to be heated rather than cooled, or to put it in a district system. At any rate, with the pledge, we totally reinvented that product line, so it's nothing like a 10%, it's literally a 10x workable energy that we get, and we're just getting started.
Super, thanks, Katie. So Virginie, same question to you. What excites you most about the progress you've made toward net zero?
Absolutely. So if Johnson Controls is a young company, P&G is a startup. 188 years. So what excites me most, I mean, I could tell you it's indeed that since we had our net zero commitment by 2040, we've reduced our greenhouse gas emission by 57% in absolute in our operations on the way to net zero, or that we are now buying 99% renewable electricity. And that's great, and we did all that while growing year on year. But what actually excites me most is that the accountability now in the business is like never before. 2 years ago, we pivoted how we lead sustainability in the company from being centrally led to being a business unit led, centrally enabled. And that has accelerated things like there is no tomorrow. So especially for what is the next frontier, part of our net zero commitment, which is the Scope 3 upstream supplier. I mean, our packaging and raw material data is over 70% of our net zero scope. And this is complicated. We have a 40% midterm goal reduction by 2030. And the first question is 40% reduction versus what? I mean, establishing the baseline is difficult. We can't do it alone. We need to do that cross-industry. This is why we work with the WBCSD, a PACT initiative, which is Partnership for Carbon Transparency, which help us get quality primary data from our suppliers, harmonize methodology so we can really look at our progress versus this baseline. And now that we have this business accountability, what we are seeing in every business is a very granular glide path toward this 40% reduction, which we didn't have before. So that's what's most exciting to me.
Terrific. Thanks very much. Same question, Doug, to you.
Great, thanks, Nat. And first, I want to start off with thanking Kara and the entire Amazon team for the vision and the leadership to bring the climate pledge into fruition and to build the movement that you are building. I think we were like number 200, give or take. I like the round number, so I'm just going to say we were number 200. But so I'm with Visa, and you may know us as the global payments technology company. We're an interesting company because on the one hand, we're this big brand. On the other hand, we're actually a small company because we operate as a network model. So we have, our customers are thousands of financial institutions around the world who either issue payment credentials to consumers or who acquire, sorry for the technical jargon, acquire merchant relationships. And the reason I mention it is that because with the pledge, it certainly has been galvanizing for us for a lot of the work and really putting a North Star around a lot of work that was already underway. And what has been exciting is we had committed to transition to 100% renewable electricity, and we've actually already achieved that. Now, we do have RECs in that mix, and we call it squeezing out the RECs. but we have achieved it, and we want to deepen the greenness of our strategy. So that's been exciting. And then the other thing, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, is going beyond, are we just a small operational footprint, or are we a company that has $11 trillion worth of payments volume processed on our network on an annual basis? That's a lot of commerce, that's a lot of consumption, that's a lot of footprint. And that spans all different types of categories you can think of. And so that's what I'm excited about. This has been galvanizing for us to say, don't just think about our own operation. I mean, absolutely get your house in order first, but how can we actually help enable a transition to lower carbon, net zero commerce and consumption in areas like travel, mobility, electric vehicle usage, and other ones that I'll talk about.
Terrific, thanks, Doug. So Chris, last to you, and I guess if P&G is a startup, and I don't know what that makes Uber. But
I've been trying to think about that as we've been going down. Yeah, maybe a baby. So hi, I'm Chris Hook. I'm from Uber, and I work in our sustainability team. We're also very proud members of the Climate Pledge, and we joined in 2020 just after we made our own commitments, actually, to be at net zero, and it felt like joining a group of like-minded people, and we certainly value that leadership, as you mentioned, and the sense of common purpose. It is very interesting to hear the different accounts. We're a technology company, a little bit like you were describing for Visa. We're a small-ish company in terms of our own operations, but have a huge platform of trips happening all over the world every day. So the thing that I'm proudest of is our ability to sort of influence that change in a big constituency of people. We've gone from having a few hundred electric vehicles on the platform, and electrifying the trips that happen or deliveries that happen on our platform is the main thing that we can do to reduce our emissions. Our Scope 3 is 99% of our total emissions footprint, and that's where we spend a lot of time doing the work. We've gone from having a few hundred when we made the commitment to 74,000 as of Q3 this year, but that multiplies out very quickly. That's 38 million trips. That's hundreds of people experiencing moving in and around in an electric vehicle for the first time through our platform, and millions of people earning their living in that way. And so I've been excited to see the pace of that change, and to understand how, if you really kind of lean into that and commit to it as a big organization with a big brand, you can start to find ways to create partnerships, and we'll talk, I'm sure, more about that, that make it easier for people in their everyday to make easier, greener choices without having to make big compromises or big changes in how they move around.
Thanks, Chris, and I actually want to build on that last point you just made about partnerships. I'll actually stay with you and come back down. But both you and Doug mentioned sort of being network companies and working with so many companies in your worlds, and I think Cara started off by talking about the Climate Pledge and the role of that partnership. So talk a little bit about, maybe a little bit more about that issue of partnerships, both through the pledge and in other partnerships. How do you think about the role of joint action with other companies? How does that help you achieve your goals? And what partnerships have proven to be sort of the most important? What really works? Is it consolidating demand, sharing data, lessons learned? What are the aspects of partnership that you really value?
I'm going to have to be quite selective on this one because I could probably talk about it for the whole rest of the panel. It's massively important for us. Our CEO has a line about how climate is a team sport, and we sort of think about that because we're a software company. We don't own the cars on the platform. We don't own any restaurants on our delivery platform. We create a connection between the supply and the demand. And so to get to our goals, which is to be net zero by 2040, to be 100% zero emissions rides by 2030 in the US, Canada, and Europe, we have to find ways to make it economically sensible for the individual Uber driver or courier or restaurant partner to make that transition happen. So that for us, that means partnerships with car manufacturers, big and small, new and old. Means partnerships with people putting in charging infrastructure, and thinking about the massive scale of transformation that's required to make that happen, and then make it as easy to use and in the right places and in places that are going to make sense for those companies and for the users. And then it means partnerships with organizations like cities, who often have to make the big decisions on how does that infrastructure get deployed, how do we incentivize that transition to happen quickly. So we're looking at all of that. It's data sharing, it's commercial agreements, it's investments where that makes sense. But for us, we'll make no progress unless we can create those kind of very tight relationships. And there's been a lot of progress on that last few years. I'm sure there will be much, much more to come.
Terrific. Let's continue on that same theme. Yeah, Doug, please.
Great, thank you. partnerships, the notion of working, I mean, it is just core to our DNA as a payments network. I mean, we're a network that connects hundreds of governments with millions of merchants, thousands of financial institutions, and billions of consumers are all consuming and transacting on the network. So this is just core to our DNA. And I think I come to the notion of the superpower I think a lot of us talk about. We have a superpower, which is we know how to move money and do it digitally and electronically, efficiently, but we don't run transit systems, we don't build electric vehicles. So everything we do in this space is all about partnership. We'll bring our superpower and others are gonna bring their superpowers. So we're in the transit space, we're working in over 700 cities around the world to bring tap to pay to the fare gate, the turnstile, so you don't have to go figure out a ticketing system, you just have your payment credential and your wallet, your card, your phone, and you can work in transit. We're working with a coalition of car manufacturers and payment companies and charging networks to bring the payment piece of, to address range anxiety and access to charging for EVs. We're part of a Travelist coalition. This is all the leading online travel agencies, OTAs, came together. Visa's part of it as a co-founder with Booking.com, Trip.com, Expedia, Google, and others who formed this because we know we got to work on taking friction out of the sustainable travel experience for consumers. More information. Let's get some common frameworks so you don't go to one site and you get five green leaves for a hotel and some other it's 2 stars. So we're doing that. And Visa and Uber Eats are actually working together on an initiative around sustainable packaging for takeout food. So partnerships is so key to our approach.
I mean, it's interesting that you say partnership is part of our DNA. I mean, I would not say that for P&G, and I always tell our people, you know how to compete, you need to learn how to collaborate. And radical collaboration. I look at impacts along the sustainability journey at 3 levels. I mean, there is doing less harm, and that's usually you can do alone. It's what's within your control, to use recycled or low carbon materials. Then the second level is to do more good. And for that, you need a few partners on the ground, like I'm thinking of our water and nature restoration project, but still you can do relatively alone with a few partners. And then there is the level of transformation. And for transformation, you need not just any partnership, but you need cross-value chain partnership. And those are the ones that excited me most, and I can give you a few examples of those. And we have multiple value chains. So, I mean, one is on water. 70% of our products need water to be used, whether you wash your hair, your clothes, do your dishes, or shave. And we have this coalition that we have created, and now we have partners across the value chain on water, which is called the 50-liter home coalition. And the idea is 50-liter home was when Cape Town got this terrible drought in 2018, facing the threat of day zero, which did not happen because the government said, okay, we are going to restrict per day per person to 50 liter. But that came with a very great personal cost for people. Women with long hair would say, I have to cut my hair because 50 liter not enough to wash and dry my hair. And so the idea of the coalition was to say, if 50 liter is the sustainable level of water in homes, let's make sure that we innovate so that 50 liter feels like 500 liters. There is no, it's abundance because we will recycle, so appliance product that saves water in home. And so we have this wonderful coalition that looks at how to innovate to get for everyone to have access to 50 liter as if it was 500 liter. So that's one. The other one would be the Holy Grail 2.0, which is on plastic. So here you have the entire value chain on plastic for what? The objective is to transform the recycling industry by attacking the sorting. 99% accurate sorting using a technology of digital watermark that is embedded in the packaging so that the recyclers can say food, non-food, which resin, and then you get very high quality recycled material which has the potential to revolutionize the economics of the recycling industry, then the recycling rates. So those are examples of cross-value chain partnership that have transformative potential. But for that to happen, we need people to be really committed. And I just want to say that because this is where we are struggling right now. It's relatively easy, to sign up to a pledge. And I'm thrilled that, Karen, you are saying now we go from pledge to action, to collective action. Then when it comes really to put the money where your mouth is, and when it comes really to, okay, what is the tangible outcomes that this coalition is going to do, it's more difficult. And the other thing is that there are so many out there now that they are competing. And and here in that forum, I get people saying, oh, why don't you join such and such? And I said, have you talked with such and such? Because they are doing the same thing, or at least they want to do the same thing. Get together so that you will help you and you will help us.
Yeah. Here, the whole is larger than the sum of the parts, huh? So I wanted to start by picking up on something, Virginie, that you said in your first answer, which is that internal partnership and that internal collaboration. There's one thing about when you go from marginally trying to reduce emissions to net zero, everybody has to be in. Now, you can look at that as a burden, but I think what you said in terms of an enterprise coming together, it absolutely sets an enterprise, I think, on fire in terms of a passion for the work. And we've really seen that. So since the pledge, even though it's been a challenging time in a variety of ways that we all can point to globally, maybe inside our own companies, we've seen a 300% increase in our colleagues getting involved in whether it's our global sustainability network. Over the course of years, we've sold parts of our business that were auto-facing. So we're 30% smaller. We're 100,000 people, but 30% smaller. Nonetheless, since the pledge and since making it clear that our sustainability journey is everybody's, not just responsibility, but opportunity to be engaged, we've doubled our volunteer hours with a company that is 30% smaller. So it's we talk about it sometimes, but it is true that people want to feel attached to something larger than themselves. And this has power in that regard. But the other partnership is external that I wanted to speak to. So a little bit of a question for all of you out there, which is, how many have heard of the major effort at this COP to try to get global commitment to a tripling of renewable energy by 2030? We're tracking it. Okay, many. How about, have you heard of the commitment to double energy efficiency by 2030? Nat has. Now, he's done his homework. But almost nobody has, but it is exactly a companion to the renewable energy piece. So the partnership we need when we eat, sleep, and breathe, Johnson Controls exactly exists to decarbonize buildings. It's an energy efficiency story. But as Amory Lovin said 20 years ago, energy efficiency is like $20 bills all over the sidewalk, and nobody stops to pick them up. So the partnership we need is for our customer partners to not be bashful and to be willing to go out there and tell the story of the exciting journey they have been on. To give you an example, so a university's working with us, ripping out all of their old HVAC stuff. They're putting those cool heat pumps in. In one fell swoop, it's a 71% reduction in their carbon and a 64% reduction in their costs. Not an increase in cost, but you cut the carbon, you cut the cost. A school district in Colorado, $39 million project. You might say, all right, well, the school's not going to have the money. The day we flipped the switch on the project, it 100% paid for itself, 25% absolute reduction in carbon, plus $1 million a year on top of that for the school district, just straight savings from all the waste that they otherwise had in throwing money towards much more energy than they ever needed to consume. So the partnership we have, but we need a lot more of, is for people to tell the energy efficiency story and have it be as much of a rallying cry as the other exciting carbon reduction tools that we have.
Let me keep going on partnership? Okay, great. I guess I would add a couple different examples. So one is, I do want to build on your internal piece, because we focus a lot on external partnerships, but I do think it's really important for all of us to think about our employees. We have 1.5 million employees globally, so it's important for us to think about how we engage our employees and how we give them opportunities. And we created something called our Sustainability Ambassadors, and we have now close to 10,000 people who have signed up for that program. And what that does is it catalyzes our people on the ground who actually know best about what they need in our fulfillment centers, our data centers, in our communities where they live, where we work, where we have operations, but what those communities need. And they have some of the best ideas about what we can do in those buildings, what our communities need, how we can redistribute product, how we can partner with community organizations. And so we learn a lot every day from those folks in our operations, in our communities, about what they're seeing, and some of those sustainability ideas we've taken and we've catalyzed and we've made into big programs. So I think that kind of partnership and understanding the avenues in which your employees can give you ideas and you can take those and scale them up has been really exciting. And it gives people an avenue to, if they're not on a sustainability team, to kind of plug into that and kind of be a part of the work overall. So that's been really, really exciting for us internally. But the other thing I think about in partnership, and I want to go back to something you said about pledges, because this was something we thought a lot about when we started this, was there are a lot of different types of organizations and pledges, so why do another one? And one of the things we were passionate about was that there were a lot of organizations out there that were targeting kind of consumer brands and sort of what I called the usual suspects. And we really wanted this to be kind of a big tent invitation, particularly to some of the sectors that we weren't speaking to. So in our jargony language in sustainability, we sometimes call these hard to abate sectors, or the steel industry, the cement industry, chemicals industry, transportation. We actually hadn't seen a lot of engagement at the time with some of those industries, but that was where we actually needed to see action in movement, and kind of, we now have First Movers Coalition, we have a lot of other industry actions that have come along, but we had not seen a lot of transformative, large collective action happening. And I think that invitation to say, let's put aside the jargon, right? Let's not talk in sustainability language, but if you don't know what scope 1, 2, 3 means, that's okay. If you don't know what all this sustainability language means, that's okay. Come ask questions, come learn from folks like all of the folks up here that have been working on this for years. Come in and just say, how do you get started? And there are many, many companies that have been doing this for a long time. What can we share with you? What do we know? We wanted at Amazon to say, we've been working on this for a few years. Here's what we've learned. And one of the things we're good at is we can mechanize things. We're really good at data. We're really good at creating mechanisms. We're really good at scaling things. So here's how we've done it so far. Here's how we've created a carbon system of record for what is arguably one of the more complicated carbon footprints out there, given the breadth of industries that we're in. And here's how we're trying to work on things, and here's where we're struggling, here's where we have challenges, but we want to have this collective action, and to just kind of demystify a little bit what this looked like, and to invite some of those sectors in to work together, because we didn't see that happening as much. And I'm really happy that that kind of partnership is happening, and some of those sectors have been catalyzed to work together, and that the focus has been less on more of the, do a pledge and put it on paper and not follow it through, but much more about action, joint action. How are you going to decarbonize, and how are we going to work together, which I think has been a differentiator for this type of partnership that you're seeing. And the last thing I'll say is, I think policy is a huge thing that we haven't talked a lot about yet, but partnership with policymakers, regulators, and the sort of tidal wave of policy that we're seeing come at all of our companies around the world, it's going to require a different level of conversation and continued partnership with the policymakers to help them understand, we do want to have a leveling of the playing field when all of that policy is coming into play, but we need interoperability, we need harmonization, and we need regulation and metrics that are going to be driving impact, and not just more and more and more reporting. Because a lot of us have a lot of work to do, and we want to be focused on making that work drive decarbonizing activity and not just more reporting. We are all already doing the reporting, and we want to be more transparent, but we don't want to spend all of our time just issuing reports. We actually want to be doing the decarbonizing activity. So I think we spend a lot of time in that partnership and in those conversations trying to create those points of saying, yes, please work with each other in partnership and work with us to understand business, understand how we're working, and work together to make that happen.
Thanks. Well, I think we've had some great insights into what each of the companies is doing, but also how this partnership and the climate pledge is helping you across companies and joint action. So I want to pick up a little bit on the theme of the various sort of other stakeholders here. I loved what you said, both Cara and Katie, about employees and the role. I mean, one thing we hear so much from all of our companies is how important talent is, how important it is to have. One of the reasons that companies find they want to make these pledges and follow through on them is that it helps attract and keep really good talent. I think we all know that folks, increasingly coming into the job market have climate action as one of their priorities. And so I want to touch as well on some of the other kind of stakeholders out there. Maybe, Katie, I can start with you, thinking about the supply chain and upstream. You mentioned Scope 3. Obviously, so much of Johnson Controls, you've got huge supply chains. How do you think about working with them to reduce the emissions you see upstream in your supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a big supply chain. So it's north of 200,000, maybe a little bit different flavor than some of what I was sharing before of be inspired, we're partners. This one, we're taking a little bit of a stick as compared to a carrot approach. We always have had a scorecard that we've had our suppliers fill out, but also similar to the timing when we signed up for the pledge, we decided to kind of take that to another level. So there is an organization that is one of the gold standards out there in terms of supply chain sustainability, and it's called EcoVadis. Some of you may have heard of it. Some of you may work with EcoVadis. So we said, what we really need to do is kind of retire our own little sustainability test and scorecard and really defer, I guess, in partnership to EcoVadis and have them be the judge. And so we now have put all of our suppliers on notice that this is a requirement of ours that they dutifully not only fill out the EcoVadis very thoroughgoing assessment, but that now, starting a year and a half ago, we've done something that I think is still pretty extraordinary, which is we have put the score that the company achieves on that scorecard on a par with the two biggest things we consider in a supplier, price and quality. So sustainability now is that top tier consideration, and for us it went from 5% of the score to now fully 21% of the score, and in 3 years we've made clear that fully 80% of our spend with suppliers will be governed by that score. So a little bit more tough love on that one.
I love that, putting that right alongside price and quality. So Virginie, maybe I can go to you, and obviously P&G also has a big supply chain, but you're customer facing as well. And I'd love to hear how you think about the customer emissions and how you work with your customers as part of your Scope 3 emissions.
Yeah, absolutely not. Just to say that on employee, 100% with Cara. If I had to say one of the things I would do differently in my 12-year journey in this space is not to take employees for granted. And so now upskilling and internal communication is a top priority, but we've lost some talent along the way. So, and supply chain, yes, and we need to talk, Katie, because we are using EcoVadis with our suppliers, but not yet as a stick. So we're a bit soft, so I'd love to understand how you do it. So yeah, I'm going to talk about consumers because we are a packaged good company. 80% of our carbon footprint is actually in the use phase. when people use our products. And the thing is that there is a bit of a science to perception gap today. Most of people believe that if they recycle well, then they have done their job in terms of reducing their carbon footprint, which is not the reality. Actually, it's a very small part of our carbon footprint. The big thing is that if they wash their clothes in cold water, that's actually 60% of the footprint of a detergent is the temperature of the washing machine. So there is this science to perception or to knowledge gap that we need to help with, but there is an even more important gap, you probably have heard about it, which is the intention to action gap. 49% of people globally say they want to live a more sustainable life. Only 24% have done something significant in the past 12 months to live more sustainably. Why? Because it's hard, because they don't know where to start, because it's not accessible for them, because it's too expensive. And this is where our strategy comes in. Our core strategy on innovation is to innovate for irresistible superiority that is more sustainable. And every word is important. And so what that says is that we lead with performance when we innovate. We don't lead with sustainability. Because if the detergent doesn't clean, if the diaper leaks, then people will have compensatory behavior that actually increase their footprint. They will turn the washing machine temperature up, they will rewash their clothes, they will use more diapers. So very, very important to lead with performance. And I even say, performance without sustainability, just a matter of time. Sustainability without performance, it's a waste of time because there is no impact. So that's our strategy, and maybe to give you one or two examples to make it more concrete. So I talked about turning the temperature from 40 to cold. This is the biggest thing we can do. This is our biggest driver as a company just on this category to reduce our Scope 3 downstream emission. Another example is, I don't know if you use your dishwasher. If you are in the US, you probably have a dishwasher, but you probably do not use your dishwasher. Why? Because there is a myth out there that if you use dishwasher, you waste energy and water, while a dishwasher in the US, a full load, 4 gallons of water. 4 gallons of water is 2 minutes under the sink. So do the math. As of 8 dishes, you better use your dishwasher to save energy and water. But for that, you need a product that gives you the confidence that you don't have to pre-rinse your dishes under the tap before you put them in the dishwasher. Here comes Cascade or Fairy, that have been formulated so that you can skip the sink and save energy and water, leading with performance. And if you allow me, just on plastic, because plastic continues to be a big topic, this is our latest Head & Shoulders shampoo. And it's amazing anti-dandruff efficacy, but as you may see from the bottle, this is empty, it's 46% less plastic. It's only 9 ingredients, so obviously impacts the supply chain, only 9 versus 24. And because there is less plastic, when you are done, you can roll it up like your toothpaste and get the last bit of shampoo out, This is leading with performance. This is the trifecta of irresistible superiority, creating value and being more sustainable. So that's our strategy with consumers.
That's awesome. Excellent. That's really terrific.
Do you have a heat pump in there?
Doug, you've spoken a bit about the really, interesting and unique among the panel role that Visa plays. And I just wonder if there are other things you want to offer about the way you interact with your merchants. How do you think about your broader supply chain?
Yeah, happy to touch on that. First of all, from working with Virginie for many years, I wash in cold now, but she has not gotten me to not rinse off the plates before going in the dishwasher. That's hard to get me mentally over that, although clearly I need to. It just goes to show that you can have leading sustainability people and no one's perfect. So everyone has their advantages and their challenges. I think for Visa, it's a couple things around the consumer topic I'm going to double down on. And that is, because we talk about customers, and we've been trying to address this intention action gap for a while, and how do we, I talked earlier about superpowers, I also talked about removing frictions. How do you make the sustainable choice easier, maybe the default choice? I think some people even started talking about how do we insert frictions on the less sustainable choice and make it actually harder to choose that choice. But where I'm going to go on this is one thing that we've seen with consumers is even just a lack of understanding and information around the connection of their consumption to footprint. And so it's like, oh, I don't know, my household, is it a heavy footprint? Is it a light footprint? If I have kids, I don't have kids, or travel, don't travel. So one thing we've done is we've partnered with a great company called Ecolytic. There's others in that space out there who helps. It's a solution that gets turned on at the bank level, because remember our direct customers are banks. And so banks can turn this feature on, and what it does is it helps show transaction by transaction an estimated, not to the nth degree accurate, but an estimated footprint of what that transaction was. So it just helps to close that information gap. So somebody might think, oh, my heaviest footprint is X. Well, no, it turns out it's actually, this is the way you're traveling, or this is your food consumption, in a non-judgmental way, and it doesn't aim to turn everyone into put out expectations of perfection, but at least it helps to give an initial start of information, personalized education based on your behaviors. Doesn't name and shame merchants either. It doesn't say, buy this product, don't buy that, shop here, don't shop there. But it's really about this behavior level. And just one other quick item. The other item that we're looking at a lot with our merchants, because you mentioned merchants, are these, I call them emerging retail models, but they're not emerging. They've been around for thousands of years, which is the re-commerce models of whether you're renting instead of buying, you're buying secondhand instead of new, you're refilling instead of buying a whole new container, or you're repairing instead of throwing out. And so we set up a behavioral insights lab, again with partnerships with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and various other partners. And we were bringing in merchant partners to come and test different behaviors. And so we've had a beverage company that's been testing how do we get consumers to use a refillable cup, like in a stadium environment. We've had a repair service, how do we get consumers willing to repair their clothes instead of buy new? And so I think it's nice because it's partnership, it brings in merchants, it brings in consumers, it looks at where are the frictions, and it looks at behavioral change to get over the intention action gap.
That's a great insights. Thanks so much, Doug. So Chris, I want to go to you, and I actually want to circle back on this issue of corporate culture as sort of the other set of internal stakeholders here, right? The corporate culture more broadly. Virginie's talked about that a little bit in terms of the importance of collaboration and being part of that culture, and we've heard that too. But I know that at Uber, you've really, my sense is, seen a shift toward really a big push on sustainability that you've been really part of. And I'm just curious how you think about that over the past few years, really shifting and emphasizing, centering that. You mentioned since the 2020 climate pledge, and what takeaways you have from that process.
Yeah, that's a great question. It has been a big change for us. We are quite a new company by any measure. And so making a commitment that lasts out to 2040 is quite difficult to do if you've only been around for 12 years. And there was a moment of trying to understanding what would this mean. How do we think forward in the future of the company that's changed very quickly, and how do you own that, and the necessity of that? So part of it was doing the work to think about where does our footprint really lie and what responsibility do we have. Yes, we're a technology company, yes, we're a marketplace, but there's also millions of transactions happening that are resulting in emissions out in the world. So taking responsibility for some of that, and then allowing people to see that as an opportunity rather than as a threat. I think there was a recognition, particularly actually as we came out of the pandemic, and our business had gone down to almost nothing at the beginning part of that pandemic. And as we came back out, there was a commitment around the leadership group to say we want to rebuild this company, we want to make it bigger and better than ever before. But part of that is about building it in a way that's going to really last. And so with stakeholders like cities, who are critically important for us, if we can't work in partnership with a city, we can't run a business that works for the city itself, but also for the people who live there or visit that city. And they were thinking about, okay, people have stopped moving, they're going to start moving again. How do we want to move? How do we want them to move differently? Our delivery business, you mentioned the partnership we have on the eat side of the business. We've committed on that side to say we'll be zero emissions and we'll reduce unnecessary plastic waste through that business. That had a huge change and transformation through the pandemic. And so then felt like we took on a bunch of new responsibilities there. In practical terms, I really liked what you said about the change between sort of centralizing sustainability and embedding it through the business. We have a very small central sustainability team, and one of the consequences of that has been to spend a lot of time working with business leaders to say, this is not something that I'm going to do for you. This is not something I'm going to impose on you, but I need you to own this target, and here are all the reasons why I think it's good for your business, it's good for your consumers, good for your reputation, good for your relationships, et cetera, and frankly, why we have to do it. And then find that network across the company such that we can create a kind of leadership team that is not just people with sustainability in their job titles. It has been a big shift. I don't think we're done. I think we have a lot of work still to do. And it's got to be bottoms up, as you were describing, as well as tops down. But that leadership is super important.
So thanks. I want to thanks for that, Chris. That's really interesting to hear and connects in to so much of what we've discussed. So I want to bring us home here and maybe start here and come all the way back, and I'll give you the last word. But just end with one or two sentences. What makes you hopeful for the future? I think that's always a wonderful question to end on. So Chris, start with you. What makes you hopeful for the future? One or two sentences. We'll come back and wrap it up.
I'm actually I always feel hopeful coming away from these kind of discussions and realizing the degree of change that's happening that I maybe don't see. You know, I'm a heat pump fan, but to hear someone talk about it in those terms and realize the speed of change is like very inspiring. And so, yeah, we're all about trying to make things happen quickly, and I'm optimistic that there's a lot of people pushing hard, and there's a lot of innovation that's going to come in the next few years.
I'd say there's a lot of focus on youth here at COP28 this year, and I'm hopeful around both Gen Z and I have a younger daughter who's Gen Alpha, and what's coming not just on the passion, the activism, the we're going to take charge and solve this, but also the connection to Visa's business. They're going to put their money where their mouth is, and they're going to say that we're going to spend differently. We're going to spend with brands that we want, on products that are good, and I think we're going to see a little more of that, those kind of decisions being made.
I'm very excited when I see how the discussion is evolving. You know, if COP21 was about pledge, the Paris Agreement, COP26 was about pathway, COP28 for me is really about playbook. And we've heard that despite the name, or with the name, but the climate pledge is so much more than just a pledge. And it's about large-scale implementation of solutions that exist. And I think that's really exciting. And it has to be made with cross-value chain partnership. And so that's why it's exciting to be in this place, because this is where those partnerships can, be reality. And that really excites me.
So, people ask sometimes, well, geez, does anything really happen at those COPs? Does it really matter? Is it just a lot of talk? You're laughing. You were thinking it. But having been around these COPs for quite some time, I guess it's very important to me to say, you know what, this matters. It matters, number one, that this is a big event every year. And CEOs have to pay attention to it, and heads of state have to pay attention to it, and leaders of NGOs have to pay attention to it, and it's a forcing function for that's accounting in terms of what have we achieved. The second reason that it's extraordinarily important, and I take a great amount of hope and excitement, is that all of those constituencies, civil society, business, and government, have shown that we can tackle this problem. You know, since 2015, we have had almost a quintupling of renewable energy capacity on the grid. Since 2015, when the experts were telling us there's no end in sight to where those emissions are going, they're now saying that they think we're going to peak maybe in 2025. And while there's a lot of people out there that want to say that tackling climate's some kind of luxury, the numbers tell us exactly different. One, what I was sharing, you're going to save money, but that's kind of like, that's necessary but not sufficient. The point is that in tackling this, we lift up our communities, we protect and preserve our health, and we inspire the next generation to be better than us. And I think that's what's happening here, and I think that's what's been happening for 30 years. So I'm fired up, ready to go.
I'm super hopeful because I feel like I'm surrounded by a ton of risk takers, and I love that. There's risk takers in the company I'm at. There's risk takers on my teams. There's risk takers in the pledge, risk takers in our signatories. There are risk takers here at COP. There are risk takers in the youth that stand up and speak truth to power. There are risk takers in our policymakers, and I think people are just ready. They're ready for change, and I think that's super exciting and creates a tremendous amount of hope. So I hope people keep taking those super big risks.
Well, thanks so much. I'll just close with a final reaction. At C2S, as I said, we work a lot with companies, and that's been something new to me since I took on the role in the last couple of years. And this panel, I think, is really emblematic of what I've learned in working with companies, which is the amazing amount of climate action that's happening, the leadership that is happening, that's so critical as part of the broader ecosystem. We talked about so many other stakeholders. We're here at international negotiations, but it's really terrific to hear the work that the companies are doing. Cara, thank you for the leadership of Amazon, not only in the climate pledge, but also, of course, more mundanely for hosting us at this panel. I think it's been a terrific panel, but thanks as well to Amazon for your real leadership on this and the climate pledge. Thank you to all the panelists, and thanks to you for listening, and I think we'll wrap it up there. So join me in thanking the panel.
Thank you, Nat.